Hello there, Mad Mike here, and welcome back to the channel. And today I figured I'd give some of my recommendations for movie binges, especially because, a lot of people are stuck indoors right now because of all the coronavirus stuff, and a lot of people are, trying to work from home and stuff like that. So you do need a little bit of stuff to kind of take up your time. So if you ever wanted to do a movie marathon or watch a series of films, um, these are kind of just my choices on some of the things that I know I enjoy, and maybe you will too. And some of the stuff is kind of straightforward. Some of it is needs a little bit of explaining, and I'll go through that as we go through the list. And this is in no particular order. The Star Wars saga, and by that I mean episodes 1 through 6, none of the new stuff. Maybe toss Rogue One in there just for fun, or you could just watch the Darth Vader hallway scene on a loop for about 2 hours, and that'll probably service you enough. But it speaks for itself. It's and it kind of again it speaks for itself. You know, it does have the unfortunate fact that you have to slog through episodes 1 and more specifically episode 2 at the very beginning. But 3, 4, 5, and 6 are all classics. And like I said, if you toss Rogue One in there too, it's kind of a nice little mix-up. Um, so yeah, again, kind of self-explanatory. I think total watch time, you'd probably wind up clocking in at, again, if you threw Rogue One in there, probably 14 hours worth of viewing time right there. But it's a fun one. Again, like I said, it really requires very little explaining. Now, the next one also kind of requires very little explaining, but this is Back to the Future, the Back to the Future trilogy. Again, an opposite with Star Wars, where you kind of reach the high point in Back to the Future Part 2, or even for some people, Back to the Future 1. Whereas 3 is always been, it's always one of those ones. It's a good movie, but it's not as good as the first two. I actually really love the third Back to the Future movie, even though the ZZ Top cameo is kind of gratuitous. I do think it's fun because you get to kind of follow the Doc character a bit more. It's not all about Marty in Part 3, and you get to kind of see that Doc Brown kind of has his happy ending, like Marty had his happy ending in the first film. So I like that about it. So it's a very complete trilogy to me. You can watch the first one on its own, but if you watch 1 and 2, you have to watch 3. Or if you watch 2, you have to watch 3, especially because 2 and 3 are so cleanly linked. So yeah, Back to the Future, great trilogy. Again, you'd probably wind up eating up about 6 hours of watch time, maybe a little longer. I can't remember. Some of those movies stretch a little over 2 hours. And then the next one down is one of my personal favorites, and that is the Friday the 13th franchise. And I've gone over this before. I love the Friday the 13th series. Jason's my favorite slasher out of the the big three from the 80s. Between Michael, him, and Freddy Krueger. I really enjoy the Friday the 13th movies a bit more. So if you're a fan of those, that's a great one to binge. Or if you're just a fan of good slashers, that's a great one to binge. Again, it has its kind of meddling and shit entries, especially near the end with Jason Goes to Hell. But a lot of the early ones and even some of the middle and later entries are instant classics. I love the Friday the 13th franchise. And you can probably eat up, you got 10 movies, so it's got to be at least probably at least 15, somewhere between 15 to 20 hours of entertainment. So that's a pretty big one. Now the next one, now we're going to start getting into some interesting ones because these are kind of my personal ones that I consider. And the next one is the Godfather Supercut. Now I don't remember if this actually exists on film, like if there's actually a DVD of this, or if this is just a cut of the film that has kind of floated around because somebody edited a bunch of stuff in. And that the Godfather Supercut is you watch because Godfather Part 2 is half set in the past and I shouldn't say past. Half of it is set before the first film and half of it is set after the first film. What you do is it's an edit of the film where the parts of Godfather Part 2 that are supposed to happen before the first film play out. Then you watch the first movie. Then you watch the parts of Godfather Part 2 that are supposed to take place after the first Godfather. Now, again, both of these films are probably, I think they're over 3 hours, both of them. So that's about 6 hours of entertainment. And if you really like The Godfather, it's a perfect cut to get into. Because it really tells a very, very complete story just because of the way that, Francis Ford Coppola made those films. So again, that's a great one. Probably, like I said, probably about 6 hours of entertainment, but you'd have to slog through that. That is a long one. Now the next one is another semi-horror trilogy, and it's one that I refer to as the Carpenter-Russell trilogy. And what that is there were 3 films that were made in the early to mid '80s, featuring John Carpenter as the director and Kurt Russell starring. And the first one was Escape from New York. If I believe so, it was either that or The Thing. But I think the first one was Escape from New York, then The Thing, and then Big Trouble in Little China. All 3 of which are completely different tonally from one another, and have completely varying plots that have nothing to do with each other. They're completely unrelated, other than the fact that John Carpenter directed them and Kurt Russell stars in them. But they're 3 amazing movies, and I always like to think that they're connected because of those two, because of their collaborations with those 3 films. Specifically because they all came out within I think a 5-year period. So I really do love those 3 movies too. Escape from New York, again, a film that speaks for itself. Kurt Russell playing Snake Plissken is great. And it's got a really good plot. Donald Pleasance, I believe, is also the president in that, who was in Halloween, which was another Carpenter film. So I really do like that character. The story's fun. Then you move on to The Thing, which I've said time and time again, I love it. It's one of my favorite horror movies, if not my favorite. Talk to me on certain days. And it really speaks for itself. The special effects are amazing. I think it's my favorite John Carpenter film, bar none. So putting it in there is great. Kurt Russell gives a great performance as MacReady. You also have Keith David coming in there as Childs, who again he would be in another Carpenter film years later with They Live. And then the last one, Big Trouble in Little China, with Kurt Russell playing the iconic Jack Burton. I can never forget the opening shot of that movie where you see the truck going, the big rig that Kurt Russell drives, driving over the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco, and you just hear the monologue of him over the CB radio, just screaming into the ether for no reason, other than the fact it's just soothing his own boredom, while his other hand is shoving a cheesesteak in his mouth. It's comical to the extreme. And he even looks like a stereotypical trucker. He has a trucker hat. He has trucker sunglasses. He's wearing these outrageous cowboy boots with a knife in them. I love this movie. And I did do a movie spotlight on it a while back. So if you've seen that on the channel, then you kind of understand why that's on there. But that's that trilogy. Then we move down to another personal favorite of mine, and this is the Star Trek film franchise. Now, this is what I refer to as the Khan trilogy. It's Star Trek II, Wrath of Khan, Star Trek III, Search for Spock, and Star Trek IV, The Voyage Home. And the reason why I like to call this the Khan trilogy is because everything in Star Trek III and IV originates from 2. If you go from 1 to 2, they're completely different stories. And if you go from 4 to 5, they're completely different stories. They don't really interconnect. 6 kind of interconnects a little bit with 3, but that's about it. But those 3 are directly connected in a storyline, because Star Trek II, obviously, at the end of that, again, if I'm spoiling this for you, I'm sorry, but the film's been out since 1982. It's Spock dies at the end of Star Trek II. Star Trek III is when they bring him back to life. So that was a direct repercussion of Khan. And then Star Trek IV is when the voyage home, because they're actually going back to Earth after they defected and did a bunch of other stuff in Star Trek III to bring Spock back to life. So all 3 of those are connected through that through line. So that's why I consider those 3 films specifically in the Star Trek film franchise to be a trilogy in and of itself. Because they're all one continuation of a singular story that just has different points in it. Um, and then the last one, if you really fucking hate yourself, like if you're the type of person that just you have a strong urge to shove needles in your eyes, you can watch the entirety of the MCU. If I remember correctly, that is up to 21 or 22 films. And again, with the Avengers films clocking in at like 2.5 to 3 hours, you're probably looking at somewhere around 45 to 50 hours of watch time to go through the entire thing, and that's not even counting any of the Netflix series or any of that crap, or any of the extended stuff that they're doing now. That's just the movies, so that's a pretty hefty one. That's an extremely hefty one. Like I said, if you really hate yourself, I did it once. I did it once. I will never do it again. Um, where I wanted to see if I could just endure it. Obviously, it wasn't for it wasn't for 50 hours straight. I wasn't going to stay up for 2.5 days. I did sleep in between, but in the moments I was awake and not in the bathroom urinating, I was watching a Marvel movie. And I did it a lot actually when they just had 5 or 6 films, because that's kind of doable. Again, like Star Wars, if you watch episodes 1 through 6. Um, but yeah, those are just my recommendations for, if you're stuck inside, if you're working from home, if you're just, lounging around and you don't really have anything to do. Those are some movies or some series of films and trilogies that I think that they entertain me, and I hope they entertain you. So, with that, I'd like to thank you for listening, and respond with any of your film suggestions, any suggestions from any trilogies or anything that you personally like to watch, uh, you know, in a series, and any ideas that you think or any critiques on mine. Um, so once again, thank you very much for watching. Make sure to hit the bell for notifications, hit the like button, subscribe, and remember, I live my life free of compromise. Do you?